the material. Being a guitar player, I always really like to focus on guitarists here. In the panel before, we talked about Jesse Guitar Taylor. We have his guitar. We also have Susan Grisanti's classical guitar here. Got one David Box's first guitar, who played with the Crickets early on, as well as a handmade guitar and signed by and other guitars. I mean, we just got all kinds of guitar stuff. And I'd say, just going back, the earliest known recording I have of a Lubbock group is from 1929. It was recorded by the Lubbock Texas Quartet. Most quartets back then had piano. This one has guitar on it. So.
And I'm David Brandon, and I've been in Lubbock since 1980. I have a guitar studio in Southwest Lubbock, and have taught many, many people through the years. A few of them on this panel, and I don't take credit for any of the success of any of my students. They all have their own individual styles and unique abilities, but I've sure been enjoying teaching, and still do. And I also have taught with Texas Tech since 2006, and just enjoy all styles of guitar, and done some performing and recording and publishing. And so I've been very blessed to be a part of the music scene here in Lubbock since 1980.
Howdy, I'm John Sprott. I played my first gig at a Mexican food restaurant next to a bowling alley in 1973. I've been full-time professional since 1983, and am undoubtedly the worst musician at this table.
That's not true. Hi, I'm Joy Harris. I'm a Lubbock native. Most people know me as a bass player, but I play different instruments. I've been active in the music scene playing bass since about 2001, running amok with a bass guitar. Yeah.
I'm Scott Ferris, and no, John, I'm the worst player at this. You know, they say to surround yourself with people who are more talented than you, and I feel really well surrounded right now. I own some guitars, still occasionally play them. I actually own a studio and produce records now, but have been involved in the Lubbock music scene for many, many years, and actually started my career teaching for David Brandon, and probably wouldn't be at this table were it not for you, sir. So, yeah.
Hello, I'm Doug Stapp. I own Ralph's Records in Lubbock, Texas. I moved here when I was 13 in 1990. So I have 2 solo albums, or 2 instrumental records out, excuse me, of silly, Yankee guitar music. Played on a ton of people's records, toured a ton, cover gigs at the wazoo. Yeah, just always here. So yeah, that's me. Hi.
Thanks, guys. One of the things that's emerged in our conversations, both yesterday evening, but also through the day already today, with people participating who come from scenes all over the country. We've heard about scenes in Minneapolis, and we've heard about scenes in Miami, and we've talked a lot about the Lubbock traditions, plural, of live music, and the history going all the way back to the 1920s of musicians being from here, being made here, going away from here, coming back to here, but also the way in which all of those different traditions are very much rooted in the place and the clubs or the venues or the neighborhoods, but even more than that, in the memories of the people who were in those spaces and interacting, the long, complex, rich memories that are here, that you share, that you have individually. So maybe we could just talk a little bit about how, for each of you, whoever wants to answer first, how this place shapes how you think about the music that you make. Does somebody want to pick up with that?
I'll try.
Okay, please do, John.
Well, it's a town with kind of a centralized kind of a scene. It sort of moves from era to era, kind of every 10 years or something like that. But I think the fact that there are places to play here, and that's not true of, from what I understand, the West Coast now, for example, is a hard place to get a gig. But if you can play a few chords and sing, you can work in Lubbock, Texas. And I think that has nurtured musicians. I'm certainly lucky to have been here and gotten to participate in it. And I think that I certainly wouldn't have played as much. So it directly influenced my competence as a musician to have places to play and motivation to try and learn how to play guitar.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from other people, but I'll just say, as somebody who comes from elsewhere, when I came to Lubbock 23 years ago now, I was very struck by the fact, and in fact, I continue to be struck by the fact that this is still a town where people go out to hear live music, where that's their thing, where even in the age when so much of our experience is streamed to us on the couch, this is still a town where there are large and pretty diverse populations of people of different generations, from different communities, whose thing is to go out 2 or 3 or 4 nights a week and
It
hear
must
live
be
music.
a tradition. It must be because, and it's through the middle part of the country. You get to either coast, things are different from what I understand. But the Midwest, you were mentioning Minnesota. That's another place where there's that kind, and you have to wonder if it doesn't have something to do with being an agrarian based economy and stuff like that. Farmers are hard working people, but when they're not working, it's for a long time, and I think picking up a guitar is probably maybe that tradition of live music is rooted somewhere in that. I don't know.
Yeah, I just know it struck me as somebody who comes from one of those coasts where also, like, the dollar per square feet is a lot higher.
Right.
It's a lot harder to make your basis with a venue or a studio or some kind of a facility. And this is a place which I think agriculturally, but also economically, it encourages people to think of being a working musician, as you were saying, John, as like a viable career path. And there are other places where that's not true.
That's a great point about property value too.
Yeah.
That is a great point.
Yeah. Anybody else want to speak to that? Joy, please. Yeah.
Okay, so my perspective on this, being from, I guess, the younger generation at this table, is I'm grateful to the older generations that have made it possible. So my perspective is coming up, grew up playing in church, and then like got in the band thing, and then like starting to play gigs out. My family, we're resource poor, but playing gigs, I remember being 17 and sneaking into places to watch you play, or other, like seeing like, oh, cool, that's cool, I want to do that, and knowing that that was an option for me to support myself. So whenever I started playing gigs when I was 17, like that's how I fed myself. That's how I paid rent. So
Yeah,
thanks.
yeah.
And then seeing, you're talking about the traditions and the vibe of the community, like people like you, like Frank Hauser, like all of the guys that would host the jams. I loved sneaking into the jams because they were so inviting of the younger cats that wanted to get up and do something, and encouraging us and teaching us stuff. So you get like firsthand experience asking someone how to do this or that, and they're patient with you and they nurture. So it's like that oral tradition. And I've even noticed that in my touring life, spending time in like Brooklyn, there's a strong Texas representation everywhere I've been, and they are representing well.
Yeah, I think that's true. It also makes me think, you made a great point, Joy, that there's a kind of generational thing that happens too, where it's not true everywhere, as John was saying, it's not true everywhere that you can actually find a venue that'll pay you to play. But it's also not true everywhere that you'll find a venue where the older players will pass on wisdom and create space for younger players who want to enter into that tradition. So it's a multi-generational kind of community as well as a geographical community. Doug?
Kind of the same. I started playing in bars when I was 14, if I remember correctly. Great Scots and Stubbs. Idiot kid playing heavy metal, and the owners of the bars were so nice to me to allow me to play these places. I mean, I'm not playing, what John's playing. I'm an idiot metal guy, and they're letting me play there. But more than just the musicians, as I was growing up, 14, 15, 16, my entire teenage life, There's actually bar owners and promoters in town that gave me and my bands free reign to do whatever we wanted, which is insanity. You know, we weren't, you know, they were the idiots playing Alice in Chains and whatever else we're playing. You know, they weren't, you know, pegging us to play what everybody else in town was playing at the time. Correct, yeah. And they just gave us free reign in Lubbock, Texas. And back then, I didn't think anything of it. It's like, well, everybody gets to do this. And then I found out much later that nobody gets to do this. We were very, very lucky. So yeah, Lubbock, no, bar owners and promoters, they saved my life. And even to the point where I think I was 17, we were playing at the Depot Warehouse, which I missed tremendously. And they hired a sound man there who hated my guts. Hated all of our guts because we're just loud and we had too much stuff, and it's great. And finally, I think it's third or fourth show we played there, he walked up to me. He said, "Your guitar tone is horrible." He's like, you know, like, yes, you know, because it's true. My guitar tone was horrible. And he's like, "Can I help you?" I'm like, "Yes, please." So he taught me how to do things. Well, he was Kiss's sound guy for 5 tours, worked with Queensryche on 2 tours. And this guy just ended up in Lubbock, Texas because his daughter was going to school and he's working at a bar for fun. This guy taught me, well, your guitar tone sucks. And thank God it's not as sucky anymore because of him. So yeah.
Yeah, I think Curtis has a comment also. And while you're passing the mic, I'll say, you know, there's a kind of, you know, my own day job is I teach music history, as at least 1 or 2 people at this table are aware. But there's another kind of history that's not necessarily in books, that shows up in the physical materials of guitars or in the vinyl of locally produced local music scenes. And that's another kind of musicology, which is part of what we're trying to capture with things like the EGAC conference, to recognize this is bodies of wisdom and lineages and traditions, which are very real and which which is the theme of the conference, we celebrate. So thank you all, everybody at this table, for being that for this community. Curtis?
I was just going to say that, you know, the old question, why do so many musicians come from Lubbock? If you go back and look at the history books, one of the first things that people would do when they would start a new community in this area, which is just a little over 100 years old in West Texas, they would get together and sing. So it's woven into the social fabric. And there's a strong Texas fiddle tradition coming out of the Panhandle and stuff. But the guitar really seems to have what's defined West Texas musicians. And because it's the portability, and you can sing, like John was saying, know a few chords, can sing a little bit, you can go out and get those gigs. And it's been celebrated to be a musician. And then, of course, with the 1950s, with the door-to-door slide Hawaiian salesman coming out, everybody started playing electric guitars. And it's just, especially after Buddy Holly and the formation of what became, you know, the formula for the band, you know, bass, drums, guitar, from here. And so it's been celebrated here. And I think it's just woven into the social fabric, and that's part of it. I do a lot of exhibits. The most successful exhibit I've ever did was at the Buddy Holly Center, called West Texas Guitars. And I had guitars from Sprott and Brandon, Pete Orta, Jesse Taylor, Butch Hancock, the Maines brothers, the Hancock family. A lot of people really enjoyed West Texas Guitar, that exhibit, and just kind of solidified that, yeah, I'm going in the right direction.
That's great. You know, you several of these comments make me think of another thing, which is there's the memory at the table, there's the memory on the stage, there's the memories and the learning and the lineage and the traditions and the expertise that you acquire on the bandstand, as Doug has said and Joy has said, John has said. There's another kind of history here, which I think is also very rich and also very integral, which is about, in fairness, building a business that works within, extends, solidifies foundation, creates foundation for this kind of scene, because it's the club owners and it's the players and it's the sound guys who aren't jerks, you know, it's the older players who nurture the younger players. It's all those things, but it's also people who kind of plant their stand here and say, yeah, I could go elsewhere and have a career as a touring classical guitarist, or I could go elsewhere and have a career as somebody who does mastering. But I'm thinking particularly of Scott and David, who, through your own reasons, which I'd love to hear, have said, no, I'm going to plant my stand here in this town, because the fact that you, all of you, but the business owners particularly, Doug, yourself as well, that you've chosen to do it here. That's another kind of distinct and regional strong foundation. So could you talk about that, how you came to the business, or why here, or what you feel this place provides?
Well, as far as why I was here originally, my wife is from this area, but we chose to stay because it was just a great place to raise a family. And I found a tremendous amount of support from the community in what I do, which is teaching guitar lessons. And I was able to go off and tour for 15 or so years and do those things outside and bring my music really outside the community. Same with publishing and recording. But I really felt a great love for the music and guitar in general here. And we always could see that in Lubbock, when the economy wasn't good, so to speak, Lubbock did well. And when the economy was good, Lubbock did great. And so it's been a really good thing just for running a business. And I've been real fortunate not just to teach a lot of students, but have a lot of teachers under me and just kind of mass produce those efforts to see that. And just, it's been phenomenal to see. And then people like you mentioned, Sean Frankhauser. I mean, Sean still teaches with us, and he is a musician's musician. And you guys just won of Midland. Were you on the Midland Blues Festival again? I mean, he's just always doing something. And you guys, congratulations on that. So anyway, Scott, you've been doing it. Encouraging everybody so long.
Yeah, for a while. I would agree. You know, my dad was in the Air Force, so I moved every 2 years of my life. So I've been all over the world. I've lived in tons of different communities, learned guitar in many of those communities from different instructors. And I was 15 years old, moved to Lubbock, Texas, and my mom looked in the phone book to see who taught guitar. And fortunately, I was able to take guitar from David Brandon, and that was a life-changing experience. And I think that is something that we should address. One of the things that I think is so quintessential about Lubbock, Texas, is not only the support of club owners, bars, promoters, venues, but the educational opportunities in this town are nearly unparalleled. You've got David Brandon with Brandon Guitar Studio and his son Jared, who's a phenomenal instructor, great musicians out of there. You've got South Plains College that has a storied tradition of literally filling bands throughout the state of Texas. You know, you've got numerous private instructors, you've got Texas Tech, you've got all of these opportunities. And I've been to hundreds of other places that don't have what we have. And I'm the beneficiary of that. I wouldn't have a career if I hadn't landed in Lubbock, Texas. I was perhaps delusional enough to just think, oh yeah, sure, you can make it from Lubbock, Texas. So, started my business here, own a recording studio now, and that's what I do all day long. And I'm very grateful. There is such a huge musical tradition from this town, and there is a constant new crop coming up. Even you were talking about the bars, the Blue Light doing the songwriter night every Monday night, encouraging songwriters to hone their craft. Then those people end up going to a recording studio and recording a demo, and then they end up going on the road and hiring guitar players and bass players. And, so we really are incredibly fortunate here in this town.
Thanks. Yeah, you make me, several of the comments have made me think of another kind of an extension of a comment that's already been made about spaces and venues, studios, learning spaces, learning studios, recording studios, the universities, right? And I should, at this point, actually, I should just shout out the very recent and very welcome new partnership between South Plains College Commercial Music Program and the Texas Tech School of Music, which has been concretized through the leadership of a lot of visionary and inclusive people as the Bachelor of Arts in Applied and Creative Music, which is, I think, a wonderful resource for the students, but it's also a recognition that, as we've always sort of said implicitly with South Plains College and my employer, Texas Tech, we are never in competition with one another. But now with this new degree, we are really concretely partnering in a way that provides opportunity for students at South Plains and for students at Texas Tech. So that's something that, having been here several decades, I'm happy to see that finally realized. There are two other things that occurred to me as part of this. which is the ongoing importance of spaces where you can learn, the ongoing importance of certain kinds of events that I think are rather unique in my experience to Lubbock, which is absolutely the Songwriter Nights, the incredible tradition of Texas-based songwriters going all the way back decades upon decades, the incredible tradition of the weekly jam sessions in many musics, because that's, to me, as somebody who also in other cities kind of cut my teeth at a jam session, with people, with getting my ass kicked on the bandstand, right? That space, a space where you can be a young in experience, maybe not young in years, but young in experience, to be able to walk on a bandstand and have people be kind to you, even if they tell you, you got to do something about your tone, right? But to do that in a way that is not dismissive, but inclusive and encourages excellence. Those things are all really important. And it extends also to the people who run the studios. And I am reminded, we need to acknowledge our great friend, Alan Crossland, who has his own, he's not able to be with us today, but he has his own, like Curtis and like other people at this table, long, deep, hands-on the mixer experience of how Lubbock music has been made. And those are things that there are lots of regional music scenes that have that, but it takes a certain kind of critical mass of players, and spaces, and attitudes, and generations, and communities who find a way to work together that nurtures just the way that our two universities are seeking to do. So I think that's really valuable insight that emerges from this. Other things? Yes, Joy, please.
I was just gonna kind of pigtail on what you're talking about the spaces and the
Yeah.
multi-generational and all of the different experiences. I am grateful to be a beneficiary of many different, what I call musical dimensions. So like growing up playing in Black church, my daddy was a preacher. So that means I only got to listen to certain things, and the way that tradition is oral and passed down, like from my uncles or whoever I was watching play. And then also taking on the piano lessons whenever I was small. So getting that classical regimented world, and then that crossing beautifully into my percussion journey. And then that percussion journey, which led me to study here at Tech percussion performance under Shin, who was a bridge in like the jazz and the orchestral world, and recruited me to do percussion, but encouraged the jazz thing, and me running amok playing gigs at bars till 2 and getting up at 8:30 for oral skills, and then running amok with the guitar, and then just touring and seeing all of that, and then just seeing how those cycles are perpetuated. And then with some of the work that I've been doing in the community, like with the jazz education aspect of things, like it's beautiful, the line of the oral passing of the baton from the previous generations to the next. And I'm grateful that these kinds of things are happening so we can document some of those stories. One of my best learning rooms in Lubbock, Texas is the Spoon, doing the Sunday jams, running amok with you and Sean, and getting up there and him helping me with my tone, this punk kid with a bass guitar and drop C sharp playing Deftones, and he's like, oh baby, okay. Like, all right, so I'm very grateful for all of those dimensions that I've gotten to witness in this place uniquely.
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Joy. Thanks. Yeah, and it reminds me, it's not a word that we've used a lot yet today, but it's something, and I will say this as somebody who comes from a colder place, and you can interpret that adjective any way you want, but it's a colder place. One of the things that I just see, and every place has its challenges, and every place has its conflict, and every place has its areas that it still needs to grow and learn, right? But one of the things that I see amongst the musicians, and when I say musicians, I mean anybody who's involved, player, purveyor, producer, owner, audience, is a sense of respect. Respect across generations, respect across communities, respect across experiences, and respect across genres. And so I've come from this cold place where, you don't necessarily walk in and say, oh, hi, how are you doing? It's so great to see you. That's not my thing. And I always notice it when the Texans, native or transplanted, show that, especially when it's amongst players in a live music scene, because that creates a kind of, it's a community. It creates community. And I think in some ways that's what we're all talking about, community across communities and community across generations. Other things people want to say? Things you want to drop in? Things you'd love to see EGAC continue to
I'd
do?
like to ask our business owners who are dealing with the up and coming generation, you know, you by recording people and you by teaching them, what has the trend been in sort of interest in music and competence that y'all have experienced in this area?
I'll say one thing and then I'll let Scott finish. He has a lot, I'm sure, more to say. I will note, just as far as teaching just across the board, used to be you'd have a hit song, and you remember, Scott, we teach it to 30 people. And now there's so many different ways to consume music that we have so many isolated things, and it brings stuff to us that we've never heard, which is great. But at the same time, we might have 30 students and we've got 30 different things going on. And you remember we'd get one great song and everybody wanted to learn it. So anyway, you know more about what's going on probably in terms of music. So
I think that that's one of the things that's so amazing about Lubbock is that, yes, I've now been here. I moved here in '83, became a professional musician sometime in the late '80s, following a little bit behind John's footsteps. I remember watching the Nelsons as a young man do their thing, and seeing each generation a new crop of kids come along that are just doing amazing things. I mean, like, shockingly amazing things. I remember, I think, Doug, I might have taught you one guitar lesson as a young man, and you came in the door and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to teach this guy. He's better than me already. And because you were a really capable young player. It was for sure that you were born to do this. And I've seen a lot of born to do this in Lubbock, Texas. I'm not sure why, but it's like there's something in the water. And I do think part of it is attributed to the fact that it is an isolated environment. I remember being a teenager in this town and people saying, there's nothing to do, but go out on the weekend and get drunk. Well, yeah, people were doing that, but they were playing guitar the whole time too, And I think that there is just something in that, plus a little bit of West Texas, little piece of cowboy spirit in the middle of it, of I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I don't care what the world thinks, and I'm gonna be this. So as a business owner, it's always thrilling to watch that. Like, I'm watching a resurgence of these really innovative pop groups happening right now. There's a new band out there called Strawberry Season that is just doing killer stuff, and it's like, wow, where did that come from? And I've seen the metal thing happen. The Texas country scene obviously has been huge, but it's not always about what's popular. Lubbock, I don't think, has ever been about what's popular. I think Lubbock has always blazed its own path. So,
yeah.
What do you see as far as interest in guitar music?
Interest in guitar music? Oh gosh. There's still tons of guitar nerds out there, which is amazing. I actually have an entire section of just guitar nerd music, and sell the heck out of it. And I find the players, if I don't already know them, and I actually buy it direct from the artist, so I can get it in the store. And
Yes.
if I find somebody on the internet that I'm like, holy smokes, this is amazing, I find them wherever they are, and I buy their product and I carry it in the store, and force these guys to buy it. And I say force them, they're happy to buy it. But yeah, no, it's just searching, and I find stuff. I find people every day that totally freaks me out. And I'm like, I've got to get this. And yeah, and people in town, oh yeah, they buy it. There's tons of guitar nerds out there. Yes. Makes me very happy. Yeah.
and I'll be brief, but I think that that's also a part of it, is that there are curators in town that introduce people to great music, yourself being one. Having a local record store, that's kind of unheard of in a lot of communities. and where you can actually go and discover music is just an amazing thing. So kudos and thank you.
Sorry. I was going to add something to that, like what you said with the environment of people like hanging out and you trying to figure out like who's listening. One thing I've noticed is I do a lot of, and it sounds random, but I do a lot of what they call barn parties. So people that just have some land down on the outskirts of town and they want to have a good time. They've got a barn, the agriculture thing. People hang out, do music, cook. And so I've been doing a lot of that, which to me is hilarious just for all kinds of reasons. But the cool thing getting in those barn parties is their kids are out there. And the kids are like all on the streaming and who's on YouTube, the YouTubers, all of that stuff. And so they've been hipped to like the craft of like the guitar stuff. And so they appreciate it. And whenever they see somebody do it live, they want to dig deeper. And they've been introducing me to stuff that I had no idea about. And I've got my little list of like, you need to check this out, this out, this out, this out. And then that conversation of, and then I'm getting, I've got 12-year-olds sending me stuff. I'm like, good God, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. I want to stay conscious of time because I know, all of y'all are busy people. I do want to make time also for the number of folks who are participating via the Zoom stream. If there are folks out there in the chat who have particular questions, or people in the room who have questions or would like to follow up with our panelists. So if you have comments or questions, feel free to drop some things into the chat. It looks like somebody in the room is about to drop something into the chat. In the meantime, I will say that I think what Joy has just commented about, the fact that there are spaces that we don't know about or that we might not know about that are actually, that bring together a lot of what we've described, which is people who still make live music a center part of what they do in a personal way, in a way that is sort of self-selected, that is unique to this area, because you have to be aware that Doug Stapp or John Sprott or Scott Ferris or David Brandon or Joy Harris are playing in town, and who they are and what that means. And then you bring your kids along, or their kids are present. And it's a kind of thing. I've encountered it in other places, mostly not in North America, actually. And it reminds me of like places from the blue light at one end of the sort of experience spectrum to the Spoon at the other end of the experience spectrum. But I have felt more welcome in the Spoon on a jam night or in the blue light on a singer-songwriter night than anywhere else I've ever been except North Africa or the west of Ireland. Because those are still places, and this is still a place where if you walk into a room and you have an instrument with you, or they know that you're a musician, there is already a palpable sense of respect for you as a person, but even more deeply just for the craft, for being able to do that magical thing. This is a person who can walk into our barn and make it just a little bit more magical place. And that's not there everywhere. And so my appreciation, as an Outlander, my appreciation for that. There is a question that's come up in the chat. Yeah, right. This is a modest question. We can knock this one out easily. Ready? For each of the panel to answer, Lubbock is a guitar town. What is it for you about the guitar that makes it fit in here?
I'm deaf. Say it one more time.
Sorry. Given that Lubbock is a guitar town, what is it for you about the guitar that makes it fit here in Lubbock?
That makes it fit here in Lubbock? For what I do, doesn't at all. Not even close. I play this ridiculous 200 mile an hour guitar music that just was not, it's not cool. Especially when I was growing up. I'm a 90s kid, so I mean, 90s kid, guitar was dead. I mean, not. Thank God for Nirvana and Soundgarden for killing hair metal bands. Thank you. Anyways, I didn't say that out loud. Anyways, but I'm of that Joe Satriani kind of thing. So I'm not. But people accept me. They have always accepted me. They have always, any kind of stupidness I've ever done, they're like, yes, do that. And even with Sprott, I remember seeing him, I don't know, I was 15 or 16, and he was doing the mic stand thing. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, I've got to come up with some silly trick. So I started playing with my tongue. And it's just like, just local competition. I'm like, I've got to come up with something crazy like this guy. But I can't steal his mic stand trick because that's his. Let's rip him off. So no, what I do is not normal here. but everybody's always accepted me, always. And I have friends everywhere here. I love everybody here. It's great.
I think you actually did kind of answer the question. Scott? What about for you?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty hard answer to follow. I know for me, electric guitar was something that jazzed me from the first time I saw an ad for a record on television for Kiss Rock and Roll Over, and I suddenly had to have a Les Paul, and that was going to be my life, much to my parents' chagrin. But Lubbock was always accepting of me and always willing. There was always some path to learning something new. I studied at Tech. I didn't study music. I studied art, but I did study composition with a mentor of mine named Steve Paxton, and he introduced me to 20th century music, avant-garde, and that allowed me to grow into what I am today. And yet people have accepted the oddity that I am once in a while. And that's a beautiful thing in this community, is that they will accept the thing that isn't necessarily popular or whatever's on top 40 right now.
Joy?
Similar answers. I'm grateful that I've always been accepted and encouraged. The situations that I've done the most well in and thrived in is when nobody tells me what to do. They're like, here's the stage, what you got? And especially coming out of the gospel tradition, where like the bass is such a driving factor, like whenever I geared towards it, I was very much encouraged. So
I think for me, it's just come down to the folks in this community being willing to give me a chance, you know, and certainly undeserved in probably at least the first 20 years of my career. For crying out loud, I was singing, and I was there are tapes that exist of me singing like 30 years ago that are just, and you know, so that's what is made it for me, is just people willing to give me a chance, and you know.
Well, I would first like to pay respect to Joy and John, both for the gigging musician that always is there, you know, night after night, week after week. I mean, I really respect that. I've done some of that locally, but it's usually more isolated. And early on, I was really accepted in the early 80s playing clubs or background music for restaurants and stuff. But for me, I think as a classical guitarist, it's not, again, the normal style you would hear here, but everyone seems to really enjoy when they hear the solo classical guitar. I play it electrified or regular. And then the other thing is just teaching all styles. I've always enjoyed all styles, so I was able to work with people like Doug and Scott, and even Curtis came in for a little bit, you know, just all the different styles. It's fun. So I think it's great.
Curtis?
For me, growing up as a child, I'd go to my grandmother's house on a Saturday night, and there's all the uncles and cousins with guitars coming together to play. So it's just like you see everybody else, and it's a family affair. It's a community affair. And all I ever wanted to do was play my guitar and cook. That's it. And I was in a band. Band breaks up. What am I going to do? I'll go into Texas Tech and become this accidental archivist collecting music. And now I just want to get back into it. So, you know, I booked a gig last night over at Bigum's Barbecue on a little stage and went out and just started playing again with a friend. And there's something about it. It's just like you want to do it. And playing guitar lets you express, you know, yourself through your music, and could be cover tunes, and I prefer original, but and I like to write crazy music too.
Okay. Those are all really eloquent answers. And in fact, it's been a really eloquent panel, and it has struck some certain recurrent themes. One has to do with acceptance and receptivity and openness and just sheer distance from everything and having to hew your own way and blooming where you're planted and deciding where you're going to plant and putting that down and growing something. And I know I personally am incredibly grateful for all of the many different ways that people on this stage and people beyond this stage and people who have gone before us and people who are gone have decided to grow something that is theirs, but that can be shared. So my thanks to you. My thanks to the panel. EGAC thanks all of you. We encourage you to come out and hear quite some number of these people at the Guitar Slingers concert this evening at 7:30 p.m. in the Crickets Theater at the Buddy Holly Hall. And once again, on the Zoom and also in the room, please join me in thanking Doug Stapp, Scott Ferris, Joy Harris, John Sprott, David Brandon, and Curtis Peoples. Thank you very much. And friends, we'll be back at on the Zoom. We'll be back at 3:45 for our next panel. See you then.